Howdy, welcome to the Pick Six Podcast, CBS Sports Daily NFL Podcast. I'm Will Brinson. I'm your host. If you're watching on YouTube, it is Wednesday, March 9th. I guess that technically, if you're listening to the podcast in audio form, it's Thursday, March 10th, which is another layer of Back to the Future complexity that we have added to this podcast as a result of going live on YouTube basically every day at 1 p.m. Hit the subscribe button. Smash the like button if you're in the chat. Tell us hello. Give a shout out to Tyler Sullivan, aka Sully. That's 3 L's, just like your StreamYard name. I don't know if you know that.
Oh, is that true? Well, there you go.
Yeah,
tough,
no, it's fine.
Tough break, kids.
I mean, breaches, breachapalooza. I mean, I kind of like the idea that you're Sully.
Well, I take the extra L for messing that up. So,
anyway, what's up, man? How you doing?
What's going on? How you doing?
I'm good. Good. Everything's great. My dog's getting a haircut. My wife is texting me nonstop about random stuff. Every day of my life.
That's great. We are running very different lives at the moment. I'm on getaway day. This is my last day before vacay. So
sounds fun.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It sounds amazing. Leave a 5-star review with a question attached to it on Apple if you want to be involved in a mailbag. And we want you to compete with us in a bracket challenge game. I'll be in there. Wilson will be there. Breach will be there. We'll apparently get Sully in there as well. And we'll want you in there too. You go to cbssports.com/pick6brackets. All one word. And the winner gets a $100 gift card to Paramount Plus. You'll be able to watch NCAA tournament games with Paramount Plus. Tons of soccer from the Champions League to CONCACAF. Golf majors in the spring and NFL football in the fall. Also, we're excited for the debut of Halo. Ooh, I'm kind of excited about this too. It's streaming March 24th exclusively on Paramount Plus. Head to ParamountPlus.com/Halo to try it free. Back to the brackets. There's just one pool. Nobody. You can also create a group to compete against friends and fill out your bracket for the chance to win a trip to the 2023 Final Four. I can promise you NC State will not be there. You can play on CBS Sports app or at cbssports.com/pick6brackets. Link will be in the episode description. You know, NC State went 7-25 against the spread in college basketball this year. Virtually impossible. Literally, Sully, the worst against the spread record of any college basketball team in the country.
Yeah, that doesn't seem too great. And I feel like you were did you ride that pretty hard? They seem to be.
Oh yeah. Down the stretch, I read it pretty hard. Pretty hard. Anyway, this is not a college basketball podcast. This is an NFL podcast. Sorry, my wife is texting me about lunch now. She knows I'm podcasting.
It's fine.
She cranks up. It's unbelievable. She like cranks up her texting when I'm podcasting.
It's like a Spidey sense type of thing.
Yeah, it really is. It's kind of crazy. So Tuesday was one of the wildest days ever. All right, so you've been doing this for a hot minute now. How would you rank it in your
career? If you make it sound fancy.
It's up there for me, and I mean,
totally. No,
Debo threw out biggest trade in NFL history with Russell Wilson going to the Broncos, and we were sort of like, and then we thought about it for 5 or 10 minutes, and we're like, probably.
It's one of the biggest ones, I mean, that I can remember, just off the top of the head. Like, that makes, again, you're talking about quarterback movement in his prime, going to a team with a loaded division now. Yeah, I mean, there's like a ton of storylines that we can look at that, especially with the after effects with Seattle too, ripping it down, getting rid of Bobby Wagner. Like,
that's what I was going to get to next. Is like, I mean, because when they traded Russ, it was like, okay, they got these picks, and immediately there was like this buzz about Deshaun Watson. It's like, if Seattle pulls the move where they trade Russ and then get Deshaun Watson, then they have completely upgraded from an age standpoint. And
I mean, it's gone down basically a decade, right? Isn't Deshaun Watson like 25, 26?
Yeah, and Russ is 33.
Yeah.
But then they cut Bobby Wagner. It's like, oh, are they just doing a full-blown rebuild? Because, man, I guess the better question is, what are the Seahawks doing? Because they have a 70-year-old head coach with a lot of youthful exuberance about him, but they just got rid of their two best players, and so I don't know if they are trying to rebuild on the fly, if they are trying to revamp, if they're trying to, go get another quarterback. It's very confusing.
Yeah, I think really the most confusing part about it, I think, is the fact that Pete Carroll's 70 years old. If you had
Yes.
just if he's just a regular head coach, average age, you'd say, okay, this team's ripping it down, they're resetting. The only reason we're getting some pause here is because the head coach is where he's at in his career. And so, yes, you could, play the game, okay, if they go out and acquire Deshaun Watson, it changes things. But I mean, they did just get rid of, like you said, arguably their two best players and definitely their two most longest tenured players on the team, two of the best players in franchise history. That screams rebuild to me. And again, if they get lucky and land on their feet and land one of these elite quarterbacks, that's great. They can keep things moving. But ultimately, I think this leads to something a little bit more drastic and them kind of reshaping. Maybe they follow a Belichick Patriots type of mode because he's an older head coach. They kind of went down for 1 year, reset everything, went after a quarterback in the draft the following year, and then they kind of get things rolling again. Again, they could draft a quarterback this year. That's a possibility, but ultimately, I do think this is a team that is trending more towards resetting unless a quarterback falls in their lap.
So you're thinking like Belichick post Brady?
Post Brady, the first year post Brady. 2020, you bring in the Cam Newton, you try to make it work, and if it doesn't, at least you'll have a high draft pick and get a quarterback there.
I mean, that's like, no offense to the Patriots. Like they were good this year. They were fine. And like at one point they were number one seed in the AFC. But like, I mean, if that, I don't know. I guess the difference is like, I look at, you look at what the Seahawks were, what the Seahawks are, and it's just hard to imagine them being good in 2021 unless there's some magic planet quarterback out there, and maybe they trade for. I've heard that, like I've heard, and I don't put like total stock in this, but like there's some buzz that they're trading for Kirk Cousins or Deshaun Watson. Like that doesn't solve anything in Seattle, right?
I don't think so. I mean, certainly you're cushioning the blow from going from Russell Wilson to what is it right now? Geno Smith, technically, or Drew Lock. I mean,
Jacob Eason, Drew Lock, and Geno Smith's a free agent, I believe.
So it's still same type of group of quarterback. I would say you'd obviously upgrade from where you are there, but ultimately, yeah, no, I don't know if you're competing with Kyler Murray in the Cardinals and the Super Bowl champion Rams.
Or what if Trey Lance is good, right?
Exactly. That is a tough spot for them to be in. And we're leaving out this portion too, where, you move on from Russell Wilson, you move on from Bobby Wagner. What is that going to do to the rest of the roster? Does Tyler Lockett, there's rumors around here in New England, like, oh, should the Patriots go after Tyler Lockett? Or on the defensive side of the ball, Jamal Adams went to Seattle to go play for a winning team with Russell Wilson. He forced a trade from the New York Jets. What is he going to do now? What, does he look at this and say, all right, well, this is exactly what I didn't want.
Lockett trade would be
very complex money-wise, I believe.
Yeah, you would have to, if you trade him before June 1, it's $19.8 million in dead cap space. And then another $11.4 million in dead cap space next year, and you lose $9.75 million in cap space if you trade him before June 1. So
yeah, it's very unlikely, I would say. Or not very unlikely, but it just would be a financial headache.
It would need to be a restructure, I think, like an extension sign, and like he's got 4 years left on his deal. It's a weird one. This would be a tough one to trade. It would need to be like 4 years, like basically do an extension with dummy years and then knock the cap number down and then trade him if they were going to do that, unless they're just completely tanking,
right?
Which is not out of the question, I guess, because then next year they'll be free of the Jamal Adams trade, the picks, right? Like they'll have their own first round pick next year.
I believe that's true.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's right. Very on point of us.
Of course.
No, but I mean, like the point being is like, if you're gonna restructure, if you're gonna rebuild, do it when you've definitely got your own first round pick.
For sure.
And another first round pick. So,
and also be smart about your assets. I mean, if you are going to hit this reset button, are you going to go in the next offseason trying to franchise and spend a ton of money on DK Metcalf to pay him as arguably the top wide receiver in the NFL. He's in the final year of his deal in 2022. He was a second-round pick. Remember, there's no fifth-year option. So you're talking about a franchise tag or paying him as one of the elite receivers in the NFL, where you can go maybe be proactive and say, all right, let's field some offers for him as well. It depends on where you feel the timeline is with your organization. Again, with Pete Carroll being so old, I think we feel like, all right, they're going to try to get this thing done quickly, but that's easier said than done in the NFL.
Yeah, exactly. And to be clear, the Seahawks could trade Tyler Lockett. Like, they have the cap space to do it. It's just that's not really a very common.
Well, especially if they're trying to get a quarterback. Like, you want to keep weapons around them.
Right. That's why it's like the Bobby Wagner thing. So the Russ thing was a stunner. Like again, I've said this like 5 times. I'll say it again. I was walking my dog. I was like half a block up from my house. I get this alert and I turn around. I go, oh bleep. And then I was like, oh bleep. And then turned around and started like dragging George back to the house while we're sprinting back to the house and screaming like, oh bleep, oh bleep, oh bleep. Because like that, it was like no one saw it coming. Pete Carroll last week said we're not even entertaining. Like Pete Carroll lied, like just a bold-faced lie. Said we're not entertaining offers for Russ. They obviously were talking to the Broncos at the time. This didn't come together since the combine. Like they sat down with the Broncos at the combine and hashed this out. I mean, and that's fine. We get lied to all the time in this business. I don't mind it. It's just, and when they did that, it was like, okay, Russ wasn't happy with them. Clearly, they all put on the nice face for the kids, and then they dealt him. But what's the next move? And then the Bobby Wagner, subsequent Bobby Wagner release makes you think like, man, this team might be like. You just can't rebuild with a 70-year-old coach. It doesn't make any sense.
Right. And again, you can play it saves 16.6 or whatever it is million off the cap for Seattle. That's why they did it. But if you're talking about a player of Bobby Wagner's caliber and you have the mindset that you want to continue to contend, and it's a guy who had a career high 170 tackles last year and is still one of the best middle linebackers in the NFL, you go to the table and see if you restructured for a guy that's literally been hit there his entire career. I would assume he'd play ball and try to see if they can work something out, maybe get more guarantees up front and play that game a little bit. But just to straight up release him, again, sends the message of, okay, is this a full rebuild? Because like you said, before you could say, okay, Russell Wilson was disgruntled last offseason. Maybe things haven't changed. They just need a reset at the position. And it's unfortunate it's the most important one, but the guy wasn't happy and it wasn't going to be a sustainable situation. But when you couple that by getting rid of your second most important player, it's a tough look there to say, okay, no, we're still going to try to contend.
Yeah, agree completely. And Molly P asked in the chat, is there a great potential quarterback in the 2023 NFL draft? I would say, like Bryce Young, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud are in there, but like there's no Andrew Luck or Trevor Lawrence. Like there are definitely like there is Devin Leary, NC State's maybe that's the move. They want to replace Russell Wilson with Devin Leary. They need another short-statured, super clutch, big-armed quarterback from NC State. That's what they need.
And they signed Jacoby Brissett for this year just to get them over there. Is that the move?
Pete Carroll's obsession. Pete Carroll once coached at NC State, actually.
There you go. It all comes together.
Was he the head coach or was he a coordinator here? I can't remember. Anyway, I'll look it up. I'll look it up during the break. And after the break, we'll talk about where the odds set up for the AFC and NFC with Russ and Aaron Rodgers on doing what they did on Tuesday. So the AFC, obviously, didn't really have time to look it up during the break because
he was the defensive coordinator from 1980 to 1982, and then he left NC State, the prestigious NC State, to take the same position at Pacific University.
So it's just not necessary. It's not necessary.
I love that, Devo.
It's so much shade. Are you sure the coach wasn't fired at that point in time?
No, I'm not sure, but NC State to Pacific, that's a jump that most people make that are trying to advance their careers.
Up high, down hard. I very nearly had to cough with the mic open. That's good, Devo. It's good. Keep that one in mind. AFC contenders. odds for the AFC Championship, the to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl post Russell Wilson trade. 2 of the top 3 are in the AFC West. The Bills are the favorite at plus 425. The Chiefs are 4.5 to 1. Broncos 6.5 to 1. And then the Bengals and the Ravens at 10 to 1. The Titans at 11 to 1. Pats at 14 to 1. Chargers and the Colts. What are the Colts doing on here? Chargers and the Colts at 14 to 1. The Browns at 20 to 1. Raiders, Steelers, and Dolphins 25 to 1. Does anything catch your eye? Not necessarily like I need to bet that, but even potentially what the hell? Does anything catch your eye, Sully?
I think one of them is the Chargers at 14 to 1. And really because, again, everybody's paying attention to the Broncos, rightfully so. The Chiefs are going to be up there too. But, I think we kind of clump them together, right? It's those 3 and then the Raiders. Like, that's at least how I kind of view it. Maybe with the Chiefs up top just because of Patrick Mahomes and them. Yeah. But you look at what the Chargers are positioned to do this offseason. They already have the quarterback in place in Justin Herbert. And they have, prior to this Mike Williams re-signing, they had the second most cap space in the NFL going into this offseason. So if all of a sudden you start solidifying the pieces that you want, I don't know, maybe you go sign Bobby Wagner to solidify your defense and you make those type of moves. All right, you're building something there. Again, that whole division is going to beat itself up. They're going to be pretty battle tested by the time they reach the postseason. And we've already seen teams, multiple teams in that division reach the playoffs. It wouldn't surprise me at all if all of a sudden Herbert takes a leap and they've retooled at all these positions to kind of create not a super team, but just a much more competitive roster going into this year.
Chargers are interesting because, and obviously Mike Williams, if you're watching on YouTube, Mike Williams not a free agent. He signed a big contract. That graphic was done by our excellent research team prior to that contract being signed. Chargers are interesting because, like, what if Brandon Staley, who got overhyped for his press conferences probably, but I think is a good coach and a smart coach. What if he learns a lot between his first and second year? I mean, being a first year head coach is hard. You are doing a lot of stuff you've never done before and learning on the fly. If he takes a leap, so to speak, in his second year, maybe the Chargers are that much better. I would offer that having 3 teams under 15 to 1 from the same division is insane.
Yeah.
Like I get it. And, we think the Broncos and the Chiefs will probably both be playoff teams, maybe the Chargers as well. But man, I'd rather take a flyer on the Ravens at 10 to 1, maybe even the Bengals at 10 to 1. Although I do, the Bengals at that sort of number, maybe I'm not completely bought in. I think the Browns at 20 to 1 is an interesting one. They were 8 to 1 last year. I mean, the only thing that changed is they had dealt with a bunch of injuries and they had a bad season. I mean, this is a team with a pretty good roster. The Steelers at 25 to 1, great coach, have one big problem in the quarterback position and just have to figure out how to fill that. And I don't know if they'll trade for Deshaun Watson. They're still such a question mark.
Well, my thing is, how much does that change if we're talking about Pittsburgh here, 25 to 1? How much does that change with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback? I think that jumps up at least. 15? I think it at least puts you in that New England Chargers Colts territory.
Yes, absolutely.
I think that's exactly where you find yourself in.
They're 25. To be perfectly frank, the Raiders at 25 to 1 might be my favorite. The Raiders can be good.
Sure.
So that division is just going to be hard.
Yeah.
There's only one team that can win it, and it's Russell Wilson just got himself traded into the division. He could have gone to Washington, we think.
Yeah, there was a report that they offered 3 first rounders or something along those lines.
And based on the people reporting that, I believe it. Like Grant Paulson, friend of the program, friend of the pod, great dude. Always, if Grant reports something, it's true. And then Ben Standing of The Athletic reported that the specific picks that were involved. So I think Albert Breer might have had something on it too. So it's clearly that happened. Let me ask you this: do you think that what's more likely that Russell Wilson vetoed going to Washington, or that the Seattle Seahawks did not want to trade Russell Wilson inside the conference because one of those two things caused that deal to not happen. You would think, I mean, if you're looking at, like, you would rather have 3 first-round picks from Washington than, and plus, you know, what, like the deal Washington in theory would have offered would have been better than whatever Denver was offering, I think.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, you can play that big what if game. It's like, okay, well, he goes to Washington, they'll be better because it's in technically a worse division. You're beating up on the Giants and the Eagles, or you're contending with the Cowboys and all that stuff, maybe. But still, you go to the AFC West, you never know. They could
let's look at it this way. If he goes to the NFC East, and as rumored, Mitchell Trubisky is signed by the New York Giants, like then Russ is immediately the best quarterback in the division, followed by Dak, and then Mitchell Trubisky, and then Jalen Hurts. The point being is, like, I think you win a lot easier in the NFC East than you do in the AFC West.
But I do think that there's something to be said for keeping him out of the conference. I mean, this is totally, a common practice in the NFL. There were reports about Aaron Rodgers. If they were going to trade him, the NFC was just a non-starter. They weren't trading him in the conference. There are teams that were reportedly, the plan, if they were actually going to move on from Rodgers, were like the Broncos, the Steelers, and the Titans, all in the AFC. I think you follow a very similar type of path there if you're Seattle, where you don't need this guy just, trucking over you a bunch of times over the course of the year and winning directly in your conference. And let's say the master plan for Seattle is to go after Deshaun Watson or get, a veteran quarterback where they can kind of turn things around quickly. You're shooting yourself in the foot if Washington has Russell Wilson. So yeah, no, it makes a ton of sense to keep him in a different conference. You deal with it down the road in the Super Bowl if you're fortunate enough to get there. I think that's probably the most likely thing. But also, if you're Russell Wilson, I don't know. I think I would like Denver a little bit more than Washington at the moment. I understand you have Terry McLaurin, Antonio Gibson, but I kind of like the situation in Denver a little bit more with Nathaniel Hackett. Obviously, a proven resume there with Aaron Rodgers, the weapons around him. I kind of like that spot better.
I also think there's a chance that, CR was like, Russ, like, you're not, I don't want to go, like, live with, and like, not like, I don't want to go live next to your family, and I don't want to, you're not working for Daniel Snyder. Like, no, I'm not, we don't doing that. Like, we can go to Denver where, I mean, there's a new, and look, as we pointed out on the podcast yesterday, the new ownership group coming in. You got, we don't know who it's going to be, but Russell makes it much more enticing. And in theory, you will get the sort of, like, Brady Stafford. Stafford didn't do this as much, but like the Brady ability to be like, hey, like, let's do this and this, because there's like, when ownership comes in, you haven't already been there. You know what I mean? Like you're going to, like, now Russ is an enticing piece in terms of what ownership is buying into. And so I think that benefits, I don't know. I think that somehow benefits Russell.
No. I think it helps. If you're talking about the sale of the Denver Broncos, yeah, of course this helps. It's like buying a new house and they just renovated the bathrooms. You're like,
and by the way, it's like we just built a tree house in the or like we just redid the kitchen.
Right.
Yeah.
So for me, again, it just makes sense. Denver, for a multitude of reasons, whether it's Russ or Seattle, I think both. Again, Russ still had to approve this deal. He has reportedly. And so, I think it's kind of a both sides thing, but it makes sense for both sides.
I believe Russ has approved it already. I believe that happened.
He has, yeah.
Yeah. Russ has approved it and passed his physical. The other players coming back to Seattle have to pass their physicals for it to be official. And it can't be official until the new league year anyway. NFC side, Aaron Rodgers apparently has not signed his contract. My God, this guy with his tweeting and his nice, what are we doing? He's like, I'm coming back although, you know what, Sully, I think that's him maybe being correct from a technical standpoint and potentially trying to continue to hold leverage for Devontae Adams getting a contract.
That's probably what it is. I think that he just saw the new Batman movie and was enamored with the Riddler, and so he's just sending everybody out on a wild goose chase.
Is it new Batman good? Have you seen it?
Yeah, it's pretty good. I liked it.
Okay. Check it out.
But yes, I think he's sending us on a detective chase of what does this mean? What does that mean? And we go start deciphering everything.
I like how triggered Mike Florio got about it. Like he wrote in all caps, he's like, why does he care? It's like,
I do think it's a somewhat of a power play. Like I said, Adams is a key thing. And I did notice yesterday, I was doing the franchise tag tracker and all this,
Yeah.
all that fun stuff for the site. And, I'm waiting to a lot of the reports of like, he's officially signed, they've officially franchise tagged Davante Adams. Every team came out and announced it on their social media platforms, like Chris Godwin tagged, blah, 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 Mike Gesicki tagged. When I got off my shift, they had not done it yet. So I haven't, again, I don't have them on push notifications or anything like that. Okay. The NFL came out with official rundown that said that they were tagged, but I was waiting and I almost was wondering like, okay, are they tagging him and is a deal super close? It was one of those things for me where it kind of was the most head scratching.
I would, if I had to guess, I would say, and I think you're right, that they have not done that.
And again, it's official, it's been done, but I just thought it was a little weird that all of these teams are announcing it and the Packers had not. And this is one of the more intriguing franchise tag decisions because I don't think he necessarily wants to be tagged. I think he wants that long-term deal.
That's exactly it. Is that in the NFL? Yeah, he is on the NFL.
He's officially tagged. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's no question about that. I think it's the Packers didn't want to. The Packers are trying to negotiate with him, trying to get a deal done. They don't want to make him mad. They know that he's on Twitter frequently. They don't want to tweet it out and have a bunch of people tag him. They don't want to tag him and be like, we've placed a franchise tag on Tay Adams 15 or whatever, or 17 or whatever it is, because that would only make him more mad. I think he's very pissed off about this.
Yeah.
I mean, the way James Jones talked about it, I mentioned it yesterday, but like watching James Jones on NFL Network, he's like, I'm very close with Davante Adams, and he is not going to be happy about this. Like, really not going to be happy. I mean, like, the way he said it was like, man, Davante Adams is going to be really pissed off about this. So I would guess that's why there's no tweet.
Yeah. And again, you're rightfully so. It's great because you get a fully guaranteed, I think it's like $20 million for him. He's making a ton of money. It's a huge number, but you wait a long time. You don't get many cracks at these opportunities to get into the open market. We saw it last year with Chris Godwin. He was playing on the tag, and then all of a sudden he's dealing with a torn ACL. He's tagged again, and that's a tough situation for these players. So again,
the franchise tag is like, it's a guaranteed 1-year deal for a ton of money. Mm-hmm. But there's a reason why NFL owners, every time there's a new CBA or a CBA, being negotiated, they are adamant that the franchise tag is staying in. It's because it sucks for the players. It prevents movement in the market. It prevents raising salaries because you keep somebody on a franchise tag and you negotiate a deal with them, and most players, understandably so, are not interested in trying to grind through multiple years of being on a tag to get the free agency and the benefits like beyond. We saw Kirk Cousins do it. And then and no one else is really, like Brandon Scherf might do it this offseason, but like Dak didn't want to do it. Nobody wants to do that.
Well, think of it like this too, Will. It's not only that, which is true. I mean, these players don't want to deal with that, but it also helps other players when players hit the open market. Like J.C. Jackson's a good example.
Yeah.
I think the number one person who's excited for him not to be franchise tagged should be Jalen Ramsey, because if all of a sudden J.C. Jackson starts making more money than Jalen Ramsey's now going to go to the table and say, hey, listen, we got to get this thing figured out. I should be the number one paid cornerback in the NFL. It resets the entire market. So a bunch of these guys get a level up in terms of their pay.
The more guys that hit the market, the higher it drives cost. It makes total sense. All right, let's talk about NFC contenders. The Packers, the favorites at 4-1. Rams at plus 425. I mean, man, you look at this NFC, by the way, and there's two, like, I feel comfortable with the Packers and the Rams. I love the 49ers, but I don't know about Trey Lance. I don't trust the Cowboys to win more than one playoff game with Mike McCarthy. And then you really start having some questions get asked here after that, where it's, Arizona with Kyler, Tampa, what are they doing? Minnesota, new coaching staff, new front office. You still have Kirk Cousins, but plenty of questions. New Orleans, no longer Sean Payton's gig. The Eagles. I mean, who wants to back the Eagles? This is the whole Pete Carroll thing has got me taking just Those random side shots, side swipes, and Divas Eagles. Actually, I think the Eagles were pretty good value there at 18-1. The Panthers at 30-1. How are we already to the Panthers here? Washington, Atlanta, Seattle now 35-1. Chicago 35-1. The Giants 50-1 to win the NFC, and the Lions 75-1. My goodness gracious, there are some 75-1 is pretty insane.
That wasn't Cincinnati last year, was it? What were they again? It was something crazy. It was a huge number where they were.
They were 75-1 to win the AFC
75.
preseason, 150 to win the Super Bowl.
Crazy.
Whew. It's insane.
And I'm sure there's probably 5 people who bet it,
Right, of course. And Breach should have been one of them. I don't know if he's on a yacht somewhere, but
Breach didn't bet.
I think one of the things, and I think we looked at this a lot in the AFC, especially with the Denver Broncos, because their numbers their futures numbers were always a little bit hedged with the idea that they could possibly trade for Aaron Rodgers, and so they were just boosted a little bit on that off chance. You're not giving them those crazy odds. I think you're kind of seeing that with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, I think so too.
At 14-1. I think that they should be low. Again, you're talking about Kyle Trask right now as their possible quarterback to start week 1. But there's been plenty of rumors that they'll be in on, these quarterbacks that become available. Deshaun Watson's a name that they've been, reportedly been interested in. So I think that is one of the reasons why that they are where they're at in terms of these odds, because they are an organization that I think is pretty open to being aggressive. They're keeping a lot of this core together that won the Super Bowl a year ago, minus obviously Tom Brady. Yes, there's the possibility of him coming out of retirement and they slot him right back in. But ultimately, I think that has more to do with what they'll do in the offseason in terms of targeting a quarterback rather than Tom Brady coming back.
And I would actually argue, too, that the 49ers at plus 550 are strictly a result of the rumors of Tom Brady going to San Francisco and keeping Trey Lance on the bench for another year at least while they make a run, because the books got burnt so hard by Tampa futures when, in the COVID year, weird season, Tom Brady leaves New England, goes to Tampa Bay. You're 100% right about the Broncos. The Broncos were 18-1 before the Aaron Rodgers signing. I don't know if anybody messed up and was like, all right, well, Rodgers back in Green Bay, let's move the Broncos to 40-1. And then people pounced on it and then the Russell trade happened. But they are, if they're just like draft props, these odds for the Super Bowl before free agency, before the draft, are going to be somewhat reactionary. They are they're hedging and cautioning themselves against the 49ers and the Buccaneers based on rumors. Because if you look at the Bucs, or if you look at 49ers right now, I think they're a good team. I don't know what Trey Lance is going to be, but they're not shouldn't be a bigger favorite than the Cowboys. And if you look at the Bucs, they definitely shouldn't be 14-1 with Kyle Trask and Blaine Gabbert at quarterback. That division might stink, but that team is not that bad. I think, Sully, the Seahawks are actually worth a little nibble, maybe, because on the possibility that Pete Carroll is not trying to do a full-blown rebuild and is going to trade, and John Schneider's going to trade for some like a Deshaun Watson or someone like that.
And so you're basically buying that. Everybody's zigging over this way, and you're zagging,
baby. We're zagging.
All right, I don't hate it. I think that with San Francisco, quickly, yes, there's certainly a Brady element to this too, but the biggest domino for San Francisco has yet to fall in the Jimmy Garoppolo trade or whatever's going to happen. That's going to clear up over $20 million in cap space for them, where you could start letting money fly. I mean, you could start bringing in whatever you want to surround Trey Lance with, which I think is another aspect to this. Yes, they could go after, Brady if he comes out, but also you could just create a loaded roster around Trey Lance if you were able to rid yourself of the Garoppolo money.
Yeah. I mean, you got a lot to work with if you're San Francisco. If once you trade Jimmy Garoppolo, and presumably somebody's going to give up something for him. People need quarterbacks. Yeah, it's going to go like the Colts or the Steelers or something like that. I mentioned the Vikings, and actually, I'll tell you. I mean, I don't really hate the idea of just betting the Packers and Rams here.
Yeah, because I don't like the Vikings at all. I believe JLC just had a report where, he noted that they would be open to ridding themselves of a couple of key players there. I think Adam Thielen was named. There was
Kirk
a few.
Cousins.
Yeah, Kirk Cousins. He has, you can check out the story on CBS. But, I don't want to, yes, they have the new head coach. The quarterback played well last year statistically. They have these pieces, but I don't know. It feels like they could be a surprise, rip it down type of, I don't know if they're going to go as crazy as Seattle did, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did either.
Yeah, it wouldn't be. I don't think anything would be shocking,
especially now that Rodgers is here for the next 4 years. You don't want to say that means anything to a team in the division, but it kind of does.
But I mean, it might mean something.
It's definitely going to, in terms of like, you should still try to contend and build a roster, but when the back-to-back league MVP signs on to your division competitor for 4 more years, you might have to have a different type of timeline for your organization.
Yes, I agree completely. And like Kevin O'Connell worked with Kirk Cousins before. Cousins only has 1 more year left on his deal. So like worst case scenario for the Vikings, you're all right. We're going to dump some guys and then we'll just do 1 year with Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
NFC feels. I mean, it could obviously change. The Cowboys could win the conference. Not insane. Trey Lance could be amazing. Not insane. Kyler Murray could come back and be great. Not insane. But like, man, you start getting past those top teams. I mean, I just think it's if I were betting on it, I'd prefer to do some sort of wager on like just bet the Rams and bet the Packers, bet them heavy instead of sprinkling around like a bunch of other teams. And you feel pretty good about having by far the 2 best teams in the division in the conference.
I think you do that in the NFC. If you're trying to sprinkle it around, it's clearly the AFC.
Yes.
You talk about all the quarterbacks that are now in that conference, with Russell Wilson now going from the NFC to the AFC. You have, Justin Herbert obviously in there, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow ascending, Lamar Jackson coming back healthy. I mean, it is a crazy list of guys that are just going to, that are, probably, I bet you the top 15 quarterbacks in the NFL, I would say over 3/4 of them are in the AFC just by, just being overweighted. And that's not even throwing out in the next few years here what happens with like Trevor Lawrence and Mac Jones and all of those guys that were drafted in the first round last year. I mean, you're talking about an unbelievably heavy quarterback conference there in the AFC. If you want to sprinkle it around and trying to find value, I think that's where you do it, because again, one of those quarterbacks could pop off. In the NFC, it feels way more top heavy than the AFC.
Could not agree with you more, as always, Sully. Okay, that's the podcast. We got it done. Taking care of business. TCOB? Is that what they say?
I don't think they say that.
The kids don't say that anymore?
I don't think so.
Okay. They said it in the 80s, I think. The kids.
Oh, okay. All right.
TCOB. Robbie got in the car the other day. He goes, "Thank God it's Friday." I was like, "Oh, that's right, TGIF, buddy." He's like, "What are you talking about, Dad?" I was like, "Never mind." All right, man. As always, a pleasure, Sully. We will, I'm sure, talk to you soon. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we'll be back tomorrow.